It's all a lie. Everything they told you about building an RPG campaign setting is wrong. Because if you start in a tavern and then build a village, then a dungeon, then a city, you'll end up with a world that's generic, full of contradictions, and demands too much prep time. But there is a way to quickly build a homebrew setting that feels interesting, mysterious, and connected, even if you've never world built before. Because if you start with the wrong pieces, your world turns into a patchwork mess. Inconsistent, boring, and exhausting to maintain. But I'm Janet from World Anvil. I was the lead writer on the Dark Crystal RPG, and I've written for Infinite Black, Cobalt Press, and more. In this video, I'll share the steps to create an RPG campaign setting that you and your players are actually excited to explore, that's low maintenance, session after session. Even better, I'll give you a structure to improvise what you haven't built yet, and guide you to continue developing your world. Because before you write a single tavern name, you need your vision. Is this a power fantasy where heroes carve their legends into the world? A gritty, desperate struggle against impossible odds? A comedy? A mystery? An unfathomable cosmic horror? Kind of like my sock drawer. Your genre and tone are the lens through which everything else will be shaped, from magic to monsters, to the moral compass of your world. You don't need to write a lot, just a few bullet points will do the trick. Or if you're on World Anvil, this stuff is literally page 1 of the world building meta, and it's got more explanation and prompts there too. Because if you skip this step, nothing feels cohesive or distinctive later.
I understand nothing.
Instead, your RPG campaign feels like a movie where every scene was written by a different person. It's how you end up with a McFayroon or a Temu Tolkien. You know, kind of a knockoff. And now that you know the kind of story you're telling, you can define the big pillars. Magic, technology, physics, and supernatural forces. Now, some of this is going to come from your game system. D&D assumes magic and monsters. Vampire the Masquerade assumes, well, vampires. It'd be pretty funny if it did. But if you want to take big swings, like magic is illegal, or the suns are dying, or the gods are dead, this is the moment to decide them. Because those decisions will ripple outward and shape every culture, every conflict, every quest. Decide them early and they'll make your setting feel uniquely yours. And they'll imbue your world with enticing mysteries your players will immediately be fascinated to unravel. And speaking of exploration, your intrepid heroes need a starting point and some rough boundaries for their adventures. And for that matter, so do you. Because unless you have decades until your first session, you can't write the entire Silmarillion for your setting. So now is the time to decide one region where you want to start, your active world building area. I recommend something about the size of a small continent or smaller. Game of Thrones started out in what was basically the British Isles, and that was plenty of space. For those in the States, that's something roughly the size of Oregon, Michigan, or a Florida-Georgia mishmash hybrid. Then make some decisions about the kind of place it is. Mainly desert or hills? Huge forests or vast prairies? Is it sweltering or icy or a mix of both? Is there a coast with an ocean or a sea? Making this choice now doesn't mean you can't expand your setting later. And you might even have ideas for what lies beyond the border. If so, write those things down in notes so you don't forget them. But your first world building efforts will focus on this smaller region, so your setting feels deep and rich, not worldwide and shallow. And so you don't use up all your creative energy before session 0. So now you know what's important and where you are, your next step is your people. And just because you're using D&D does not mean you have to include every ancestry or species ever printed. You can totally create a region where dragons and demons have been locked in a battle for supremacy and humans are pawns in their game. If so, only include those species. You do not have to have elves and dwarves if they don't fit your vision. Just make sure you let your players know in advance so they don't dream up yet another dwarven succubus hybrid. I know, they're at my table too. So to get started with your people, ask yourself, who lived in this region first, and who lives there now? What's the broad strokes history that shaped them? 2 to 3 bullet points is totally fine. Think cataclysms, plagues, ascensions, the big stuff. The next step is figuring out what your model day people need and what they need from each other. Keep this high level, just enough to give shape, flavor, and direction. For example, maybe you have a group of humans descended from the mysterious ancient people who once inhabited this land. And a group of dwarves moved here recently to prospect for minerals. And why not have an incursion of the Feywild for good measure? That's plenty of present-day peoples to be getting started with. It also provides lots of potential drama for your players to deal with. Now you know who's there, you can add a few major cities and write 1 to 3 bullet points about them. Are they trade hubs, fortified castles, ports. And seriously, check out our video on world building your history like a vengeful god for turning ancient civilizations into a treasure trove of dungeons and secrets. We also have a culture template video for an overview of creating fascinating fantasy cultures for the present day of your setting. Now that you know who lives here, you can define what's happening right now. What's going on in your world? For example, a Dark Lord is rising in power and his cultists are everywhere. Magic becoming unstable, with disastrous consequences. Ancient dragons waking from hibernation. A war brewing. A new religion spreading like wildfire. Or a new game of chance, or a drug, is the latest fashion. Or maybe something as simple as a trade dispute is putting pressure on your starting region. Now, you're not writing a newspaper, so why are you adding these? Well, current affairs make your world breathe. They create motion, endless quests, encounters, and complications for your players. They are story engines that you can return to again and again. Create 4 or 5, and you can use one as a main campaign arc, and the others as background flavour. Now, and only now, do you create your tavern. Sketch your starting settlement and the surrounding region. Put it in the vicinity of one of the cities you sketched out in step 3, and they'll have a major landmark they can visit at some point in the future. Then ask yourself, what did the ancients leave behind in this small area? How are current affairs of the country or continent affecting daily life right here? Which factions are competing for power, and how can you show that to your players in this little settlement? Basically, take all the great world building you just did, probably in less than an hour, and show don't tell it to your players within their starting location. You could have army recruiters from the city trying to swell their ranks. Perhaps bizarre priests are walking along the road, or everyone's gossiping about returning dragons. Then just turn these into adventure hooks for your players. Rival factions are looking to recruit adventurers. Rumours tell of monsters erupting from ancient temples, and that new religion isn't as squeaky clean as it suddenly seems. You have been hired to dig up the dirt. Suddenly your first session feels vibrant and layered and full of adventure, and your campaign world feels deeper than the map of a single town. And with this firm structure, you can expand the rich details of your setting as you inevitably invent things during a session, or dream them up between sessions. That richness comes as the players explore, and your organic creativity will grow over a solid structure, like vines on a trellis, so the foundations remain strong. This is the Agile world building method in action, and it allows you to have a strong original world and keep pace with your players, without having to world build every single detail up front. So, remember I promised this would help with prep? Here's how. Every time your players are ready to move on to a new chapter, you can expand according to your vision and what you already know. You're not starting from scratch this time because you know the rules of your world. You know its peoples, its history and its tensions, what's happening right now. Prep is faster because you're not reinventing the world each time. You're just exploring more of it based on the same principles. Maybe you'll move on to one of your other cities you sketched out in step 3. Perhaps when your players pursue one of the larger drama points, like the Awakening Dragons or the Dark Lord's cultists. And later you can create whole new regions with entirely different flavours. Desert empires, frozen wilds, haunted archipelagos, while still keeping everything cohesive. Because you have a strong vision and a strong foundation. So don't start with a tavern, start with your vision. Build your world's foundations first, and your history and current affairs will hook your players and save you valuable time throughout your campaign. So now you know how to build an intriguing and action-packed campaign world, but there's one place where even veteran GMs get stuck, because none of this will land for your players if your places have bland or unpronounceable names. Or if your NPCs are all called Boblin the Goblin. Names are hard, so click the video on screen where I'll show you how to create names that feel authentic, memorable, and perfectly match to your world's vision and vibe. And hey, while you're there, like and subscribe, so I can keep helping you build the worlds of your dreams. Now grab your hammer and go world build.